And we're back. So I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself, tell us a little synopsis about yourself, and then we will begin our conversation.
Okay. Now? All right. So, okay. Well, great. Well, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity and the work that you're doing here, just spreading information via your channel. I'm Tim Swain. I'm currently in Ghana. A little bit about myself. I am a Texan. And lived in Indianapolis, Indiana, have a nonprofit organization. The name is Diaspora, and our vision is to revitalize disenfranchised communities. And that was part of the reason that led me to Ghana, because we work to basically help people reconnect with their spiritual, cultural, and professional identity via cultural immersion trips. Most of what we do is in Ghana. And around 2.5 years ago, my wife and I decided that if we wanted to have a greater impact on the continent and a greater impact within the diaspora, then we had to be on the ground in some of the places that we're serving in. And we decided to make that move. So I'm here in Ghana now. 2 weeks from now, it'll be a year that I permanently relocated. And I'm just enjoying the experience.
Awesome. So since you have been there, I have some great, I'm trying to turn the volume down on this iPad. I have some great questions and discussion topics for us today. So since you've been there almost a year, tell me what repatriation means for you and your family. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, when you send me the questions ahead of time, I've been thinking about it. And it's interesting you asked that question, because I finished school and I was in the process of actually putting together like a workshop on what does it really mean to repatriate, and how does that fit into Black liberation? But because I was in school, I didn't get to it. But repatriation for me, I thought about how we need to open up the concept. First and foremost, I'm gonna talk about it, but within the framework of Black liberation, because that's kind of like my, that's kind of like my framework. You understand? And so,
okay.
And the reason for me they go hand in hand is because, like, when I think about the conversations that happen now around what it means to be liberated, I think about, some like Black theologians like James Cone. I think about some Black leaders like Kwame Ture, also known as Stokely Carmichael, and how they realized that in order to get beyond some of the systems that we have to reconnect with our roots. And so as we talk about repatriation, for me, what it means is a reconnecting, not just geographically, for example, as a person of African descent with Africa, but a reconnection and embracing some of those broken linkages that were a direct result of that transatlantic. It doesn't mean that you just going to replace 400 years of history and you start dismissing everything that has happened to you, because those are vital parts of your story. But what it means is you search for some of those linkages, and it's like the idea of Sankofa, right? Sankofa means to simply go back and get it. And the interesting thing is, I heard this is not my illustration, but I heard this illustration before. When you look at the Sankofa bird, it's reaching back to pick up an egg. And one of the speakers that I heard talk about it in the context of Black America was, for a lot of Black Americans, the egg represents our histories, our knowledge, and our context of who we are. And the pain, right, in our neck of trying to reach back for a history that's no longer there causes some of the internalized oppression that we see. But the beauty in all of it is this: we can still strive for a better future by, in my opinion, repatriating, not just geographically, but as I said, ideologically, as well as, even socially and culturally. It's kind of a long definition, but
no, that's okay. We always have our own ideology or definition about what it means personally to us. But I had Exodus 8:7-6 on last week, and when I asked him about it, he said it meant freedom to him. And that's actually what it meant to me. And it's something also that you said when you were talking about reconnecting, basically from whence we come to have those relationships with your roots. I always say part of that freedom is in here and in here.
Yeah.
Because some of the ideologies that we do have, we need to release them coming from the West, because everything that comes from the West is not good. But that has been a propaganda that has been disseminated throughout the globe, is that the West is better than everywhere else. And people kind of conflate the things. So I'm glad that you said that. But I do recognize that as individuals, our story about how we achieve that is definitely, it is not monolithic. It would be different for everyone, you know. So since you've been there for a year, how would you say, as a person coming from the West, how would you say your adjustment has been for you? Because there's a lot that goes into that.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot. And that's a really great question. I would say my adjustment has been a little different because I have been traveling back and forth to Ghana in particular for over 10 years. And so some of the things that may have been rough for other people, now it was still an adjustment now, but it wasn't as much of adjustment in particular. So I'll talk about, I think, two particular things for me. The first one is the cultural adjustment. When you're coming from a place like America, you don't know that you have privilege. I don't care if you're Black, if you're white, if you're Latino, you have privileges that you don't know that you have. And when you come to Ghana, I think sometimes, especially as Black Americans, or even just all Americans, you assume that people think the way you think. So I think the first thing was really adjusting to the culture. Ghana is very connected spiritually and then religiously. Spiritually in the sense of everybody has a concept of God in some kind of form or fashion. Religiously in the sense where most people are Christian or Muslim, right? Or a very small amount of people practice their traditional religious beliefs, but everybody has that kind of sense of religious whatever. And because of that, everybody operates within this construct of like hierarchies and lowarchies. You know what I'm saying? I just made up that lowarchies word, but it felt like it fit within that, within what I was trying to say. But so culturally, I think adjusting to just like in America, we're individuals. You can live next door to somebody for 20 years and never know who they are. But in Ghana, it doesn't work like that because you go from individual culture to community culture. And at first, it's very shocking. The second thing I think was the biggest adjustment was, I think, just finding my place. The truth is, when you're coming from a place like America, for most of us, we step into a privileged position in Ghana. We're not working class people. Like we're not like a coconut seller on the street. We're not hustling in the street. More than likely, we're moving into middle class Ghanaian society. And because you're moving into middle class Ghanaian society, like at least for me, there was this idea that, okay, I didn't want to be too flashy. Let me just be humble in certain things. But then I realized, okay, I'm not Ghanaian. I am American. And there's beauty in having a dual identity. You know, you don't have to be either or, but you know, there's beauty in both of those stories. So I think culturally, and then just learning how to adjust to some of the class systems, I think was probably one of the biggest things.
Interesting enough, when you talked about the privilege, I wouldn't say I had the misfortune, but I'm going to use this colloquialism. I had a friend of mine, a Nigerian friend of mine, basically chin check me about that privilege because I never thought I had it. I don't walk around with that air on me.
Yeah.
Even though I recognize I am an American. But he said to me, you're going to be quietly surprised about your American privilege that you know that you have. And I'm thinking, I don't even act like that. Because, you know, as Americans, we have a pompous attitude about what we should garner. It's just the way our culture is. So most of us, no matter where we travel to, we do find ourselves exuding that type of privilege onto people. Because again, we're bred to think we are the best on the globe.
And it's unconscious. We don't even know that it's there.
Exactly. And I was saying this to him and he was like, no. Like, no. Because I was never trying to exude that persona. That's not who I am. So good point with that. And I always say that I've been to a lot of places, and I recognize that we as Americans, we foster this. An example is like the first time I went to France, and French people, even though they could possibly know the English language, they are not going to speak English to you. They are going to force you to speak French. Now, I have no problem with anybody being a patriot from whence they come. None. We all should be. But as an American, I'm sitting here saying, now, I know I heard her speak English, but she would not do it. She wouldn't do it. Why? I'm in France. So there again, that American privilege to a point that I'm saying I'm struggling with my French, even though I had my little electronic translator, it wasn't working for me. It just was not. Yeah. So, the frustration with that. But my attitude was that, again, as a pompous American. Now, of course, the subsequent times I've gone back, I knew the game. So, hey, I assimilated, if you will. It didn't bother me anymore. So I totally understand what you're saying. And even when you talked about working class and middle class, I do believe that some of us, because now I want to say it's a craze going on right now. I don't want to say it's popular or it's pop culture, but you have right now, there's more Blacks in the diaspora moving to the continent in large droves than ever before. And what I want to say is that you're going to have some of us who are actually in that class, let's say in the West, but yes, when they arrive, they would not necessarily be working class like what you indicated as well. They would immediately move up to the middle class. And I think the self-identity for some, it may be more welcome than others. Because think about being an American, a Black man in America. And if you were let's say you worked for the city and you worked city services. Yeah. They would consider you working class, right?
Exactly.
So imagine that person going to Ghana, and then all of a sudden he has been elevated. He has been elevated to what we call middle class, even though you and I know that working class people, some of them have boatloads of discretionary income.
Yeah. More than some of the middle class folks, because it's an identity thing. They're trying to look good, and it's interesting you said that, because what you see is, at least in my experience in Ghana, you see some of the same characteristics of when our identities is more conflated with materialism than being deeply rooted in who we are. And so when I come to Ghana, I dress like what they would consider a small boy, right? It's a t-shirt, slack, just pants, jeans, because number one, it's a little hotter. So when I'm decked out with my Ghanaian attire, it's hot. I'm sweating.
Hot.
But the thing is, there's so many people that are trying to look good, and then I even see how people will treat me when they assume, like if they don't hear my accent, right? And they assume I'm just some African, like what they call a small boy, just like a peon, right?
Right.
How they treat me versus when they hear my accent and they assume that I'm American and what all comes with that. And I see the same thing, when I go back to, when I think about growing up in Black America, right? Like we want to look good and show people we doing good, but then we really may be struggling. And it all goes back to this sense of identity and how, it's like when we're not grounded with who we are. And I think that's one of the challenges that oftentimes comes, sometimes with folks who come here, because when you come from a place like America as a Black person, you're used to being second class. You're used to that treatment. You're used to being treated everywhere you go, you're being judged based off the color of your skin. You come to Ghana, all of a sudden people treat you like you're Oprah or LeBron James, right? And then it develops sometimes a sense of like, you know, people trying to get money from you and stuff like that. So what I've experienced from a lot of people who come, especially from America, who don't really not familiar with Ghanaian culture, they assume that they're going to be embraced as a fellow black person, not understanding that our concept of blackness in America is not the same thing as here in Ghana. The average person doesn't even know that they're black. They're just living life. And they see you as a lunch.
Yes. Yes.
And people get deeply hurt. They're like, how can my people do this to me? But it's like, this is just human nature. It ain't nothing to do with being black or white. It's just, listen, you got money, this person don't. They're not going to rob you at gunpoint, but they may overcharge you for something. They may try to squeeze a little bit more out of you, you know?
Correct. And, you know, I think that piece of it, an important point that you made about the identity. I was speaking to a friend of mine, and we happened to be talking, and I said to him, you know, like people who in different African nations that lived far from the city centers, or what we call central business districts, they don't care nothing about what we got going on. They're trying to feed their families, they're farming, they're doing their daily lives. So everything that's happening outside of that, they really have no concept of it. Why? One, they don't care because their families come first. Yeah. But see, as Americans, when you mentioned earlier about that communal sense, that's more important than all of that other stuff that's happening. And we as Westerners coming over, that is one thing that we really need to hone in on, because culturally, we're not communal like that. We are so vastly different. We're so vastly different. Even when you think about the most close-knit communities stateside, they don't function like communities on the continent. They just don't. They don't. Their idea of community and being communal is vastly different from what you see there. So different. So different. So definitely some good points. See, I knew this was going to be a good conversation. I knew it.
And you know something else that's interesting, you know, I realized when I got here that home is always the most familiar territory. And we tend to look at home a little bit more critically than someone on the outside. For example, when I hear some Ghanaians talk about other Ghanaians and how I hear some Ghanaians saying, oh, we don't support each other, we're not close, we don't take care of one another. I'm coming from the outside looking at like, listen, this person's car just stopped. 8 people helped them to, you know, like push their car. This person didn't have no food, and about 4 people helped them. This person, and I'm thinking like, if this ain't closeness and togetherness, what is? Because I'm from a context where like literally, you can live in a neighborhood for 20 years and not know none of your neighbors. Like I've had stories happen where I've had friends that have literally been in the neighborhood for 8 years. This happened to one of my friends. They got robbed in the middle of daylight. They got home and the person said, I thought they was moving stuff out your house.
See?
That's America.
Yes.
8 years, same neighbors, the person got robbed. The neighbors were looking at the person getting robbed and thought, I just thought they was moving.
You know, that is a true testament of our community. But you hit a point, because you do hear them say things like that. You know, one thing I noticed too, just in my travels personally on the continent, the communal sense is continent-wide. It is continent-wide. Now, you may have some areas where that community is actually stronger than others, but in terms of like what you're speaking, helping and feeding, I mean, I remember as I was telling people, I was in Malawi and people may have still lived in thatch roofed huts with no doors, but if you didn't have somewhere to go, they would be like, come on in, Lizzabitty, come on in here.
Yeah.
We got somewhere for you. Yeah. So that whole sense, not even thinking, well, she could be a serial killer, like we would think. Yeah. You know how as
listen,
Tim, I'm sorry, now I can give you a couple dollars. You go get your room, but no sir, no sir, no sir.
But that's how it is. I didn't grow up like way back in the day. But when I moved to Indiana from Texas, I saw major differences in terms of Southern culture versus Midwest culture.
Of course.
And you realize, like, okay, you know what I'm saying? It's different levels to it. Because like in the South, it's definitely like, it ain't no strangers. Like everybody is like, not everybody, but generally speaking, one of the characteristics of the South is Southern hospitality. That's what it's known for.
True.
And so, and when you think about even the transatlantic and how some of those closest vestiges of those kind of like primal roots from West Africa, like that's along that coast, right? Virginia, the South, and what may have you. So, and then when you look at communities that had to be more communal because it's like, we all we got. Like that's when you've seen a lot of people that were a little bit more connected, a little bit more cohesive in terms of their ideologies, because like we literally need each other to survive, as opposed to like, I had a shock. I remember when I moved to the Midwest, it was cold outside. My car didn't start. This is like my first week. I asked somebody for help and they was like, child, I ain't got time. I got to go to work. And I was just like, I was like, man. And this was my neighbor. I was like,
yes.
Wow. So
yes,
it's
so I totally understand, but everything in perspective, if you will.
Yeah, exactly.
So moving on, in terms of being when you talk about continental Africans and you talk about blacks in the diaspora and converging and trying to break down some of the negatives that we have in our head, and breaking barriers with one another to forge onward and be prosperous together. What are some things you think that we could do to foster that, to nurture that? Because as you know, culturally we're different. And so it's going to take a lot to move that about. So what are some of your ideas about that?
This may sound real simple, but I was watching I was watching the Fresh Prince 30-year reunion, and I was watching Will Smith at the Red Table Talk as he was talking about his relationship with the original Unveiled. And he talked about years and years and years and years and years of therapy taught him how to really listen well. And how when somebody is telling their story, to validate it, not interrupt it, and to really let the parts that make sense. And I've realized that coming back and forth to Ghana, living here, we don't know each other's stories. And because, especially as some of us as oppressed peoples, because we don't have as much space to tell our stories without being told, oh, shut up, get over that. When we finally get a space to tell our stories, we want everybody to listen, not realizing that somebody else is like, yo, let me tell my side of the story. And so what happens is it makes these cultural clashes. So I think the first thing that we really need to do is understand that we haven't created the narratives about us. We're not the ones who propagated the media about what Africa is. We're not the ones who propagated the media about what America is. So we have stories that are being told that's not told from the people that are being directly affected. That's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it sounds basic, but we really just have to be patient and just take the time to listen and be humble and know that if I go into a place and I see somebody operating in a certain way, although it may be frustrating, for example, like let's say getting lights, and it may take you, in the US, it may take you, 24 hours, you call the electric company, boom, your light's gonna be on. In Ghana, it may take you about 2 weeks. But beyond that, not to criticize the system and criticize the process and attach it to somebody's moral failures or social failures. But I think the mind of understanding, observing, and then asking myself, okay, well, how can I make this better? Here's a real basic example. You have some people I know from the diaspora that have come to Ghana. They've been here for a little while, they've studied, and then they have started, they fill the areas where they see gaps. For example, maybe like customer service. So they provide customer service trainings. They fill the gaps, let's say, for example, recycling. They say, man, this trash is everywhere. There's a lot of trash in certain parts of Accra, particularly everywhere.
Correct.
And so they've said, okay, let me fill some of the gaps and do some recycling. And not only is it a business opportunity, but it's an opportunity to help employ people. It's an opportunity to really help the nation. And I think that when we start thinking more of like, okay, these are my brothers and sisters, and we're all connected, I think that it opens up our idea of moving from being criticizers of what we see to really just being understanding, without that lens of condemning. And it sounds real simple, but I think that's really the place that we need to start. Because otherwise, what happens? We come and criticize in somebody else's house,
right?
Somebody else's home?
Right. So I totally agree with what you're saying. People need to, and see, I'm a bit more robust in my stance. You're very polite. I like that.
Well, you can keep it real.
But my thing is, see, when people come and they make the criticisms about what's happening on continental Africa, I want them to give that same criticism from whence they come.
Yeah.
When we talk about, let's talk about crime, for example. I've been on 20 countries on the continent. And in those countries, outside of nefarious people adding fuel to fire, I've never heard of the police killing young boys. This is my own experience. Now, people talk about certain places. That is some political stuff that's going on, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're talking about a regular, normal day life. There is no place on earth where there's no crime, where there's no people who are not scamming. Now, the West has made millions and billions and trillions from the same things that the people who come onto continental Africa complain about. But you didn't say anything when they were getting paid off of that. You see, so I do find that's very problematic, because you need to judge the same place that you come from, judge it the same way where you're trying to say that you're going to actually plant new roots. It's not fair, actually, when you think about it, because the playing field is different. If all of the nations were just as industrialized as the West, then you can make some comparable comparisons. But since they're not equal, I feel like people are doing a disservice. And a disservice because people who may have been on the fence teetering, now they have a new something that has been put in their head, like, oh my God, this is what's going on. Maybe they decided to visit, and then their visit, they got all these negative things in their head, so they really can't even enjoy the place that they've come. So sometimes these prejudices that people give us and put in our heads, we take that on, and then we can't see the forest for the trees because we're too busy trying to see about all these things. My thing would be try to disprove what they're saying. I mean, you know for yourself, living there, children are able to play freely, walk freely, and no one is bothering them. Parents do not have to worry about their children being kidnapped by people who prey on children. You know, it's something to that. It is something to be said about a kid being able to be a kid. Just playing and frolicking with no care in the world.
I live in a well-developed area in the city I'm in Ghana, and I went for a run the other morning, and there was a little boy outside just butt naked. And I just thought about, and the boy was probably about 7 years old. And I just thought about how in my mind, sometimes I play this game. I say, man, I wonder, I count all the things that somebody would call the cops on you for in the US and Ghana. Like somebody would call CPS, Child Protective Services.
Yes.
And so but that freedom to exist in continuity with, nature and just basic stuff that I don't think we understand coming from the West. And I get it, because when you live in dysfunction, it's like if you grew up in a dysfunctional home, you don't know that home is dysfunctional until you get out and realize, okay, everybody wasn't yelling and screaming and punching each other at dinner time. I thought that's just how everybody did it. Everybody wasn't packing guns. When you go, listen, in America, I tell people there's guns everywhere. But you don't realize till you get out, everybody ain't packing guns in Walmart and in Home Depot and Target on their hip like it's the Wild Wild West. Really, that's something is not right about that. Or everybody don't have to go to school where you walk through metal detectors. In high school, and you walk into a high school or middle school, and you got people, you got the resource officers, and it look like a prison in here. Oh, that's not normal for everybody. No, that's just how we doing it.
Exactly. But it's something you said even about the little boy. Even if they wouldn't call CPS, by the time you had come back from your route from running, he probably would have been missing. Think about that. That is the West. So I'm saying, even in being a parent that had to be that comfortable, because it's really innocent. It's innocent. There is nothing really there for us. But when you think about that, the Western mind and all of the ills that could actually plague a parent with a kid just being free, you can't even be free like that. So the innocence of how truly innocent a child could be is no longer there. Even think about your parents when they were coming up. Sure, they may have been dealing with all of, the racism and ills that were plaguing the times, all the way in the 40s, 50s and everything. Even though it still exists, it just has a different name. They were able to be free like that as children. But somewhere that whole paradigm, it made a shift, and that is no longer the case. I mean, you have parents who are more paranoid. I'm not a parent. I probably would be highly medicated if I had to be a parent there. Because I have to think about it. Each time you leave the house, all of them, these 900 things that could go wrong. That is a state of paranoia. How can you be sane? How can a parent be sane with all that going on? I mean, I don't know.
I know a lot of people, we have a son, he's 4, and I know a lot of parents. I mean, here's a quick story. I was, at the church that I used to go to, I worked with the young kids, like the 10 through 12-year-olds. The short of the story is this. One of the parents that I knew, these are like middle class doctors, professors kind of people, right? And what happened was there was a guy who worked in the children's ministry, and the young girl is like, their daughter is like 5 or 6, and she didn't have any offering. And so the guy was like, I'll give her some offering. And that grossly offended one of the parents. And the parent was like, well, wait. Like, we taught our child not to receive any money from anybody, blah, 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 right? So they had that conversation. And then maybe about a couple months later, the guy said something like, hey, you should come over to my house and play with my daughter, something like that. And then that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. But when you got more into the conversation, like the one of the parents was feeling like that's grooming behavior. Like, and I'm saying it wasn't, because I don't know. And I don't know that person's story. They may have been a product of something where they've experienced it. I don't know. But I'm like, man, that's a lot to think about. Like, to think like, I got to watch out for grooming behaviors at church because they're giving my child $1 for offering. And I'm like, that's a lot of stress.
Yes.
That's a lot to be thinking. And it's like, that's grooming behaviors. They offer the money, and I'm seeing what they're saying. And I'm not saying it's not, because I don't know that person's experience. I'm not saying it's invalid. I'm not saying it's valid. I'm just making an observation. And these are some of the things I thought about too, even having a child. I'm just like, if my son is running around in Ghana, you cautious, right? Because you don't have to be oblivious to things, but it's not the same consciousness of like, what is he doing? Why is that person doing this? Why? Because that's enough, like you said, to drive you crazy.
I'd be on medication. Likely in a straitjacket. That's too much for me. I mean, that's serious, because you think about it as an adult, all of the other things you'd have to be concerned with, basic providing housing, keeping the utilities on and feeding, and now you have to put all these other things. It just seems like it's just too much. And then we wonder why we're stroking out and have all of these health conditions. It's a lot of stress. And we don't really equate that with it, but that's truly what it is. That's really what it is. because we all handle stress differently. But at the same time, you're in a constant state of paranoia. Isn't that what James Baldwin said? To be a black man in America.
And to be conscious. It's to be in a constant state of rage.
Yes. So it's the same thing. But you're in a constant state of,
yeah.
I mean, that's just too much. It really, really is. But it's good points that you brought up about that in terms of syncing the two to forge on and be prosperous together. So let's say someone is deciding, okay, I want to make this journey. I want to move on to alkebulan. What are some essential things you think a person should think about when they are actually selecting the country they want to move to? What do you think some pivotal items that they should be concerned with?
Yeah. I think the first thing is you have to ask yourself the why. Like, why do I want to leave this place? I think I've experienced some people who have hated where they are so much that they don't think about would the love of the new place outweigh the hate of the old place. You know what I'm saying? And then when the honeymoon wears off, and it's like, I thought the grass was greener. I thought if I got a new chick, then it's gonna be better than who I'm with. And it's like, no, you're gonna stay on the same party.
I like that.
And the second thing will be, you really got to assess your financials. Like I think this is one of the things I think a lot of people underestimate. How much money do I need to live a life where I'm comfortable? Because we have a lot of social systems in America. Like, we got welfare systems, we got a lot of social systems that'll support you. In other places, listen, if I can speak just about Ghana, listen, if you broke here, you gonna struggle. It's a different struggle than like an American struggle. So you really got to consider your financials and get a game plan together. And I would say people will assume that I'm just going to move to a place and I'm just going to get a job there. Now, if the economies are the same, in most places it's not, especially talking about continental Africa. But if you're talking about working, like for example in Ghana, what you're going to get paid as a person less. My background is higher education administration. I worked in universities. I worked as a professor and blah, blah, as an instructor, and did other leadership programs. If I do that same job here in Ghana, ain't no way I'm finna get paid what I got paid in the US. And in the US, it was pennies anyway, because higher ed don't pay much anyway. So you gotta think about your budget. You gotta think about, what do I really enjoy about this place? Why do I want to move there? So your why, your budget. The other thing is, you got mosquitoes. The other thing is, you gotta think about, what am I gonna do? Because let's say, for example, you have some resources that'll last you a couple years, so you don't have to work. But after that, what are you gonna do? You're just gonna sit around all day long and, eat grapes? Like, you gotta have something to do that's meaningful.
Correct.
And I would say one of the other things to think about is, I tell people, especially if you're coming from a place like America, don't operate in a vein where it's like, I'm just gonna kill everything over there and I'm just gonna start fresh here. Because when you think about any country, if a country just says, we're not gonna do no importing, no exporting with nobody, everything is gonna be in-house, that country is probably not gonna be as successful as somebody who knows how to leverage relationships. But the fact is, we do have privilege coming from the West. Okay, the dollar is worth a whole lot more than the CD in Ghana. If you had money coming in from the West, if you know how to, monetize what you do, right? That is worth a lot more than coming to some other places. So you don't have to totally dismiss those histories and those legacies and those experiences, but learn how to value them for what they are and build on new ones as you go somewhere. So to recap, ask yourself your why. Why do I want to be at whatever place I'm at? The second thing is, you have to get your money right. People grossly underestimate a real good financial plan. The third thing is, don't dismiss all your ties with, where you're coming from. You know what I'm saying? Because there's opportunities there. especially when you think about business opportunities and relationship opportunities.
Yes.
Don't close the door on that, because that's just not wise. And that's my opinion. Some people feel like, hey, America, KKK, and and all the other kind of stuff, and it's jacked up. Don't get me twisted. But at the same time, I also recognize that it's all a part of the story. That's all a part of the story.
Correct.
So I would say start there.
Okay. Well, then tell us then, because you mentioned business opportunities, can you give some insight to some good ones, some good business opportunities there in Ghana that, let's say, a person coming in could actually delve their hands into?
Yeah. I'll make a disclaimer for the audience. I'm by no means any kind of business guru. I'm not a tycoon and none of that. I'm just a guy who makes observations. And I will say that I've been able to have conversations with people about this very question. And this is going to sound very simple, but the crazy thing is, right now in Ghana, this is what's known globally, kind of like by some economists and stuff, as like the third scramble for Africa. Because you have a continent that is relatively undeveloped. You have relatively cheap labor. So the opportunities to develop businesses is booming. When you talk about a place like Ghana in particular, really, honestly, this sounds so basic, but anything could be a business. Let me give you an example.
Okay.
There is a challenge sometimes with restroom facilities. Like in the States, you can use the restroom anywhere. Gas stations,
Correct.
hotel, like you never think about, where am I going to use the restroom? In Ghana here, it's not like that. So you have a company that does like these portable luxury toilets.
Yes.
Right? You have other businesses like people that have like courier services where all they do is deliver for your business. The stuff that we're kind of used to, like Uber Eats, and I think if the only thing you did was write a list of all the things that you use in the US or wherever you at, like those systems, of all you did is write a list of those things, and you came to a place like Ghana and you saw whether or not, if the place you're living in had that, and you started right there, you'll be in a good place. You'll be in a good start. Because here's the thing, the stuff that we're so used to is still very new to a lot of people, particularly here, because of the exposure. And when you come with that mentality and those new ideas, and you're willing to put in the grind work to learn the culture and learn how to really make that successful, you could really make a killing. No, seriously. And a lot of people do that. They just study the market and they implement ideas that's already working somewhere else. They just kind of put a little different, put some sauce on it and then repackage it here. So, and I mean, you got things like agriculture, because in Ghana here, the land is very plentiful.
Yes.
Very plentiful. You have businesses, things like recycling. I've known some people that have come here, Americans that have come, they've started like tomato farms. They started pepper farms. So, I mean, there's really a lot of opportunity. Real estate as well. I mean, there is right now currently a housing shortage here in the country. So you have a lot of companies that are coming and building like bananas. I mean, they're just building all kind of houses and stuff. It's crazy. So, I mean, there are some opportunities. And the thing is, it's not saturated. That's the biggest thing. It's not as saturated as a place like the US. No matter what it is. I don't care what it is.
Well, you happen to mention something about, were you saying a company is there with luxury toilets?
Yes.
I wasn't clear about that.
Yeah. So I was saying that anything you see as a gap can be a business. And so this company, what they do is they have like luxury portable toilets. You have an event, they show up, and the toilets are like, it's kind of like a toilet that you would find in like a...
No, I know what you're talking about, because they have them like for these big weddings and things like stateside. And even in Germany used to use those in-place ones like years ago. Of course, they've elevated since then, but yeah.
Exactly, same thing. And here's the crazy thing. You'll see people, because unfortunately some stuff like that is not as common. Here, you got people that will be taking selfies because it's a nice it's a nice restroom. Because it's just not as common.
That's hilarious.
But for us, it's just like, man, this is like
Yes.
this is a restroom. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? But and that's the thing, when you come with that, anything you see as a need, when you help plug in the gap, I'm telling you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, you're basically saying that any problem solving business would be tentatively good for the local market economy.
Exactly. I mean, I just interviewed a cleaning company here in Ghana.
Yes, I saw that, and it was a great interview.
And I found them because, you know, I was looking for somebody to clean. I had somebody cleaning my place. They didn't do a good job. I randomly found these people on Instagram. They came, and the job that they did was immaculate. And all it is the thing that separated them from other people is this: marketing. And they just did a really good job, and they had good customer service. Those basic things. That's it.
Soft skills.
And
they were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
Saying yes, teach yes.
Wow. They killing it. They killing it.
See, do you find though, because something that you didn't say because I saw that interview, you never said if there was an abundance of cleaning services there, but you did note that you liked them as well because they cleaned very, very well.
Yeah.
And the lady that you interviewed was saying that they don't just be, they don't just like they're wiping and not really cleaning. So I got that as well.
You do have several. I mean, you have them here. The difference would be, it's just like, I tell people just like this. When you go into the store, for the average person maybe watching this from America, you see about 80,000 different kinds of cereal. But every week, them different kinds of cereal stay stocked. And it's because they have different demographics. Certain people eat the Walmart brand cereal. Certain people eat the ones with Tony the Tiger. And truth be told, some of them are made by the exact same company anyway. But so it's all about your customer. And so you have those companies, but from my experience, what I've seen is with companies that are doing well and ones that are not doing well, it's the marketing and customer service. For a person like me, I don't want to ask 80,000 people for a referral to receive one thing, right? What we're going to do is we're going to go to Google, we're going to type ABC in Ghana.
Yes.
We're going to look, we're going to see what pulls up. So that means as a company, you got to have your SEO on point, your search engine optimization on point. You got to make sure that the number that's listed, if somebody call it or normally hear or WhatsApp it, somebody going to answer. You got to make sure that if you have an Instagram or a Facebook or a Twitter account, when I actually go there, the information is updated. And that's the thing that I see separates a lot of people. They don't have the basics. Or you call the phone and it's like, hello, what's up? And it's like, is this ABC company? And then sometimes they be acting like you disturbing them. So it's like, oh no, I'm there. And so I've seen that is one of the big differences. Just customer service.
Okay. But that's good to know. That's good to know. But I did see that interview, and I thought it was a good interview as well. I thought it was a good interview, and when she was talking about her equipment and all of that stuff, I thought it was a very good interview. Well, Tim, I want to thank you for joining me today here on the Lizzabitty channel. I am a proponent myself. I will be making my move over here shortly. But I always want to engage with people to get their perspectives on different things, as well as living and doing business on the continent. So I want to thank you for your insightful discourse today. I think it has been good. It's going to be good for the viewers and everything. So thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having me. I certainly appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.